Hello, and welcome to the Hormone Genius podcast. I'm here with my co-host Jamie, and we are diving in a very complex topic today. We're going to be talking about endocrine system disruptors and their impact on the environment, on our human bodies, and what we know, what we don't know about endocrine system disruptors. And this is a big topic, Jamie. I'm a little intimidated by it, and I have to admit that doing research about it also is quite overwhelming and kind of scary at times. And
Yeah.
um, actually, just to start off, what got me even in the last probably 6 months to a year interested in this is my 15-year-old son was listening to a Joe Rogan podcast. And he was like, "Mom, you got to listen to this one. This is right up your alley." He's like, "I was listening to a podcast where they were interviewing a doctor, and they were talking about how different chemicals affect testosterone and affect the human body from a reproductive toxicology standpoint." And that episode, I would encourage everyone to listen to. It was a doctor, Dr. Swan. I think her first name is Joanna Swan. And she was talking about phthalates and their effect on the human body. And it's mind blowing. And she works for the National Institutes of Health. So this is like a no joke research area about an endocrine system disruptor, specifically phthalates and their effect on the human body. So that got me just thinking more about this topic. I would say, I've never been like super into learning about environmental stuff. And I really was like, I need to know more about this.
Wow. What are phthalates?
Phthalates are chemicals that are excreted mostly from plastics. So they make plastics pliable. So they tend to, all of your kind of saran wrap type things, shower curtains, they're pretty much ubiquitous in so many different things that are pliable. So we are surrounded in phthalates.
Mm-hmm.
And they are, they're something that they have found in pregnant women's urine, and it can be measured in pregnant women. And frankly, this is true of a lot of chemicals. You can probably find them in the vast majority of all of us to a certain degree, because again, the exposure is just so, it's all throughout.
Mm-hmm.
So phthalates, mostly though is your source is going to be plastics. Actually, they do come from cosmetics too. So your personal care products, another area where phthalates exist. And, this podcast was fascinating, and they talk about how they measured women's exposure to phthalates, and then they measured something called the anogenital distance, AGD. And this is the distance between the back of the gonads or testicles to the anus in male infants. And they found that boys who were exposed to phthalates at higher levels had a shorter anal genital distance. Like it physically changes like our reproductive system. It kind of, again, this is mind blowing and frightening to some degree. And the National Institutes of Health is studying this. And when Joe Rogan on this podcast, he was learning about it, he's like, how come we aren't hearing about this?
Yeah.
And, again, just with a lot of things just don't get pushed into the media for whatever reason. So this is very concerning. And again, these chemicals are ubiquitous in so many products that we have. So, we're going to talk about this more and how we can take possible steps to avert this. But unfortunately, if you're a human being and you live in our world, you're going to be exposed to some of these chemicals, and phthalates aren't the only ones. So, we'll bring up more as we talk.
Wow, Teresa, that is crazy that it would change the physical body of young boys. Wow.
Yeah, the reason why they say it does that is because, so when you're a little tiny baby and, growing as an embryo into a full grown baby, there's a point where whether you're going to be a girl or a boy, that you're going to either develop testicles or you're going to develop ovaries, right? And it's that point where these chemicals can become a problem. And if they disrupt the process at all, right at that moment, right?
Yeah.
When you're going this way or that way, there's just the decrease in the ability of the body to fully form kind of this area. And again, kind of shocking and something we really need to all start to educate ourselves about and to start to make decisions about in terms of our, speaking out about it. But also the biggest thing I think as human beings that maybe feel like overwhelmed and not sure what we're supposed to do is purchasing power. If we want to drive anything, we have money, we spend it in our society, we have purchasing power, and we're going to have to choose which products we purchase versus not purchase. And so that's going to be our biggest kind of avenue for making, helping companies decide what to do. If we stop purchasing products with these chemicals in them, then they will have to make changes.
Supply and demand. If no one's demanding it, they're not going to supply it. That is so, so true. I really want to know, and maybe we'll talk about this later on, but I want to know, what are the alternatives to phthalates? Like what can we do? And hopefully at the very end, we'll kind of wrap that up and you can share more about that the alternatives. Something this makes me think of is, Teresa, how was it 2000, I think it was 2013, the FDA they required that there'd be no trans fat ever again. Like they sanctioned it. They said in the next 3 years, by 2018, so I guess it was 2015, by 2018, no trans fat in restaurants, foods, anything, because it was causing high cholesterol, heart disease, all these things, because it was a synthetic fat. It was a man-made fat. I often think about how the things that we make as substitutes for the things that come naturally in nature can cause chaos in our body. And so it's interesting that with the trans fat, it was so obvious that, of course, the government says you can't use it no more. It will no longer be in your food. You do not need to worry about that anymore. But yet we find, these effects from phthalates or even synthetic hormones or anything else that do affect our body and do cause side effects, do cause problems. But yet, why is, again, like you said, why is that not being brought to light? Right. It's the same thing, just, different perspectives, I suppose.
Yeah, so let's go back to the beginning and talk about what an endocrine system disruptor is. So an endocrine system disruptor is any chemical that basically either mimics or thwarts the action of a natural hormone. And according to the people who study this, there's 80,000 endocrine system disruptors out there, and we've studied very little of them at this point in terms of their effect on the environment and the human body particularly. So we have so many, and that, I suppose that wouldn't be surprising to most of us that we have all of these chemicals, but what's concerning is that we don't know what their impact is. And so we're starting to digest and learn more about certain ones. Well, one of the biggest ones I think all of us have probably heard about, just because as mothers, maybe you heard about this in baby bottles, was BPA. So, and can you say the word BPA? Biphosphonate?
I don't.
Yeah. But that BPA was taken off, taken out of things. But the problem is that if you read about it, even though it was taken out, they actually only, in some cases, they can say BPA free, but they can also just make the chemical one thing different and just not call it BPA anymore. So now it's like BPS. And now we can say you're BPA free, but it's actually still a chemical in there, guys.
Oh, geez.
So again, because of companies wanting to continue to make money and make these products sometimes, so we really have to be so educated in this area. And I find this interesting. And so we talk about like birth control, right? Because I think people wonder, is birth control an endocrine system disruptor? Well, first and foremost, it's the biggest endocrine disruptor of all time, because it's not even its like longer term impact on the environment, but its actual job is to disrupt the endocrine system. So just from the standpoint of what it is and how it's supposed to work, like its actual like action, it is supposed to disrupt your endocrine system. So it's the biggest endocrine system disruptor we have, really. But people wonder then, well, what impact does it have though when women take all of these birth control pills, millions and millions of women, and then they're excreting byproducts of those birth control pills into our water system. So what have you learned about that, Jamie?
Yes. Well, what I find is super troubling, but not as troubling as the male baby thing with the phthalates, but this is still troubling that the New York Times, I found an article, they reported that the estrogen levels in water systems, so for them it was the Shenandoah and Potomac, it was responsible for intersex fish. So there were little male fish that were found carrying eggs in their testes. I'm like, what the heck? And even in like the wastewater facilities and things like plants, they're not able to, like the root shoot germination process, it does affect not just our bodies physically, but also nature, in fact, and even entire fish populations. I'm not like super passionate about fish, by the way. I mean, I like to eat fish. It is good and healthy for us, but just, I think it's just a sign of what other ways is it affecting the animals and our ecosystem and all of that. But entire populations of fish have been wiped out due to the hormones that are very difficult to be broken down into the water systems, through water systems and through the waste management. It's hard. Yeah. So yeah, it's concerning. It's concerning.
What we don't realize is that our water filtration systems that are set up by, of course, our governments to keep us safe and keep our water healthy, a lot of these chemicals that we have now didn't exist when we put those systems in place, right, and then made the kind of caps on what certain things cannot be in our water. So pharmaceuticals and chemicals that we have now, you don't know if you're drinking them, and we know we actually are drinking a lot of them. So that is really frightening, and something I think, again, at least we can potentially take action for, if we have the capability to, is thinking about how we can filter our water better, because of these chemicals. But yeah, I mean, all the animal stuff is important. You're right, Jamie. But I mean, we care about human beings, of course, so much more, but we have to look at animals to say, okay, and we do this all the time in research, what impact does it have on them first before we decide, does it have an impact on the human body? And when I've looked at research about birth control, they basically say, well, at low levels, we don't think it has an impact on the human body. Yes, we see that it's changing these fish systems from male to female. We see that, but we don't think the same thing is happening in humans. It's a little scary, though, to take that. And then the other thing is because cause and correlation is really hard to make when you are dealing with thousands and thousands of chemicals. Yeah. So what the problem is like, when I read articles about endocrine system disruptors, they're like, yes, we probably think oral contraceptives have an impact, and they're listed as an endocrine system disruptor by the World Health Organization. But the problem is like, in the world of what they want to tackle, they're going to want to tackle all those other chemicals first. Why? Because no one's going to want to be able to give up birth control. Like, we're willing to take the risk of that one, despite potential harm, because people say, no, we need birth control. Women cannot give up birth control. So let's work on all these other things first. Mm-hmm.
It's so interesting, Teresa. If I'm ever giving a talk to a group or whatever, it's almost like when we say synthetic hormones through birth control and all these things are not good for the body, not good for nature, not good for so many things. It's as though when we're saying that, they automatically think, well, then that means that I'm going to have 20 kids. And this, again, is a whole other topic. I just want to say this quick. If you're listening and you're like, oh no, I'm afraid, I need birth control. And just like Teresa said, like, the birth control pill is going to be the last thing they take off the docket. Here's the thing, and we've said it a million times, but I'm going to say it again. There are natural ways to avoid pregnancy. It's not like we're saying, it's either you have birth control and then you manage your family size, or you don't have birth control and you have 20 kids. No, there are natural ways. Your body is very intelligent, and our body tells us when we're hungry. Our body tells us when we're tired. Our body tells us when we're fertile, and our body also tells us when something's going on, and we can't understand what that thing is if there's something that is going on, a dysfunction, if we're covering it up with birth control. Our body is smart, and it's trying to communicate to us. So we live in a world, again, with the supply and demand thing. We're always demanding birth control. well, then that's what we're going to get. But if we are demanding natural ways to manage our fertility without birth control, then likely that's what we're going to get. And so I just think it's really important for women to know that. And I wanted to just throw it out there.
Yeah. And along with that, Jamie, because it makes me so sad because hormones are so important. And I think people recognize that. They're like, oh, I know my hormones are important. They affect your heart and your bones and your nervous system and so many things. Think about it, guys. When you take these synthetic hormones, it's not just that you are putting those hormones in your body, but because of the way the endocrine system works, what you're doing is you're negatively suppressing your own hormones. All those hormones that are meant to take care of your heart, your bones, your brain, your joints and everything, you are suppressing the natural God-given hormones that protect our human body and to make it flourish and to make it healthy and make it survive over a long period of time. Mm-hmm. That's what's really concerning to me. It's like you're taking these chemicals and they might have their own negative effect, right? Yeah. They might have their own side effects, but not only that, it's a double whammy. You're not allowing your own natural hormones to work because of the fact that the endocrine system works by these positive and negative feedback loops, and you're suppressing your body from making hormones in. Mm-hmm. So it really is something I think women don't get the opportunity to think about because it's just this, again, kind of like passage of rights or whatever that, you just go on birth control if you have painful periods, or you go on birth control when you're ready to get married and not want to have a child. It's just, everybody thinks it's okay, but stop and think, is it really okay? Do women and men and everyone in the environment deserve this as the option? Is this really the only way we can make this happen, by using these strong synthetic chemicals that may influence our entire bodies in this way?
100%. I always think about, again, like that natural law, like things were made with an intention, with the rhythm, with the system, and we don't want to mess with that. Okay. So what are some other endocrine disruptors, Teresa, that we can discuss?
Yeah. So the herbicides and pesticides would be another huge group. And, we think, probably at this point, glyphosate is one that I think everybody hears about, the chemical in Roundup. Mm-hmm. And Roundup is still out there, and they can find it in pretty much most human person's urine as well. But there's another one out there called atrazine, and atrazine is even more commonly used as a pesticide. And it was banned in Europe years ago, but it's still being used primarily in the United States. So United States tends to kind of be slow in this environmental protection of the human body and of our environment to getting some of these super toxic pesticides and herbicides that are out there. Mm-hmm. And of course, we know that all goes into our agriculture. So soybeans, like in Nebraska, where I live, and probably in Iowa too, but Nebraska particularly, we are the biggest soybean crop in the country, I think. Mm. And soybeans tend to be the most pesticide laden. And then they get used in all sorts of different products. And so those chemicals come into our body. So herbicides, pesticides, phthalates, BPA, receipts. Did you guys know that there is any receipt that you put in your hand that comes out of the machine at a restaurant or at a grocery store? Do not take the receipt. The receipt is laden with toxic chemicals too. That thermal kind of stuff that they use on those receipts is toxic. So now, and thankfully, with credit cards and the way they work now, I think most of the time people say, do you want your receipt? And we all say, no, why would I take a piece of paper I don't know what to do with it? I'm just going to throw in the trash. So it's a good idea not to touch receipts.
Oh my gosh.
Especially when they come right off of the print. So that is another area too. Let me see if they can think of anything else. Well, let's just talk about, there are natural endocrine system disruptors, Jamie.
Can I share one more?
Yes.
I'm going to share one more. Dryer sheets. Do not put dryer sheets in your dryer. So when you think about your clothes, you're wearing clothes all day, right? For the most part. And so if you're washing your clothes in detergent or anything that has toxins in them, but then especially if you're heating it up in a dryer and you're throwing the fabric softeners, I know it's like a huge carcinogen. And again, people aren't told this, because as the dryer is hot, it's kind of breaking down what's on the dryer sheets onto your clothes. But it's not just that, it's that you wear your clothes all day. It's because you wear your clothes all day. So that's the issue, is that it's kind of transferring over to the clothes and then you're wearing your clothes. So an alternative to that would be dryer balls, like wool dryer balls, and then just throw them in. And I love using oils, as you all know. And so I put a couple drops, throw them in. It smells nice if you like dryer sheets for the smell. So that's another big one. Just ditch them. Don't buy them anymore.
Another one too I forgot about is flame retardants too. So all of our furniture and everything is sprayed, mattresses are sprayed with all sorts of things to prevent them from, I guess, going up in flames. But those are toxic chemicals too. And unfortunately, it's hard to get away from some of those things. But flame retardants are another one. So I guess let's get to kind of the good news and what we can do to help reduce some of our exposure to these chemicals that are ubiquitous in so many ways in our environment. So there are some things that we can do. And I think we've brought up the Environmental Working Group before. Yeah. They have a great website, great resources where you can go and find, what are the non-toxic types of products that I can buy, or even what products am I using? You can actually look up and find out through a QR scanner that you can see what toxic chemicals are in the products that you use. Mm-hmm. So Environmental Working Group, ewg.org, is a really good resource for at least starting to get to know what's in your products that you use.
Awesome. And you had mentioned quick about natural endocrine disruptors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, phytoestrogens would be the big one. So soy, go back to the soy thing. And they found in studies that if you eat soy, it actually decreases your testosterone in men. So there is an actual disruption of the natural male hormone when we eat too much soy. So, you can take natural things too, but you also have to be careful of those. And I read an article about lavender. Too much lavender can actually increase estrogen levels as well and mimic the estrogen. So there's quite a bit of natural endocrine system disruptors too. I don't have a whole kind of list, but I would say soy is the biggest one. And not that all soy is bad, but we have to also be careful and use things in moderation, because even a natural thing can actually attach to a hormone receptor. And that's what we're talking about, because hormones are always a lock and key approach. It has to have a receptor site to go to. But anything that looks enough like a hormone or acts enough potentially like a hormone can actually attach to a hormone receptor and have an action in the body.
And I think too, I was doing research on the soy, and correct me if I'm wrong. So there's the soy that's genetically modified, and then there's soy that's not genetically modified. So that's like in China, where they're eating a lot of soy, that their breast cancer rates aren't nearly as high. And because they're still ingesting soy, but it's because it's not genetically modified soy. Same thing with like lavenders and things, because I've kind of did some research on that. It's based on how they're grown and how they're taken care of, I think. And that's something I wanted to share.
Yeah, I think you're right, because, and again, it gets confusing because there's all these other chemicals laden on top of a natural thing, and then that's affecting the endocrine system too. But that's not to say, I think a natural thing could actually potentially affect the endocrine system. So it's always good to, research and, do your best again to try to understand what is good and what is not good for the body.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. Okay. So now let's talk about some ways that we can help our bodies, because it can seem so overwhelming that we're literally swimming in a world of endocrine disruptors. So Teresa, what are some thoughts and ideas you have? And I can share some of my ideas too.
Yeah, so I have a list of a few things, but number one is simple: washing your hands. Everything that we touch basically could potentially be a toxic chemical. So always thinking about just washing our hands with good soap and water just to get things off of them. Skipping the receipts, that was a big one, just because that's an easy thing that you put immediately onto your hand that then you could go touch your children and, again, so skipping the receipts. For the flame retardants and stuff is dusting and vacuuming often. So again, in our home environment, we, of course, we want to use natural cleaning products, but we also want to think about how we can pick up anything in our environment that potentially could have those flame retardants or other chemicals that are coming from our furniture, from mattresses and things like that. So, using a HEPA filter on your vacuum is a really good idea to try to reduce some of those chemicals coming through. And then the fragrances that we use in our houses too. I know for me, if I go into a house and there's like those things that plug into the wall, I immediately start to feel kind of sick. So I can just tell those things aren't good. So we have to be careful. Candles can emit toxic chemicals. Those Febreze things or whatever you plug into your wall, those can emit toxic chemicals. So I'm sure you have some great ideas, Jamie, for some natural scents that you can put into your home instead of these ones that could be hurting us.
Totally. I 100%. It's the fragrance. And then there's fragrance that come, like aromatics that come from the earth that are great. To give you an example of how great they are, if you have flowers or houseplants in your house, that's also another way to clean your air. Open up a window. I always tell people, like, especially in the winter, I know, but your house is more toxic and polluted in a sense than the outside air, especially in the winter. So open a window, blow your fans, like get what's in your house out. But even just having house plants and flowers, that actually cleans air. And of course, I love using diffusers and oils, and that also cleans air as well. Other things I think about are if we're putting something on our face, kind of like that clothing thing with the fabric softener, if it's on our body for a length of time, that's also something to keep in mind. And these are just really simple, easy ones, because again, it can seem very overwhelming, but another simple, easy thing could be in terms of what you buy. If it's something that you're putting on your face for a long time, like, makeup, it's going to be on your face all day. So that would be worth spending extra money on to make sure that your makeup is clean makeup. Shampoo and conditioner, that's not on your hair that's not on your scalp as long. You wash your hair and then you rinse it out. It's good to have natural shampoo and conditioner, but it's not as vital because it's not on your scalp or your skin as much as the stuff that you put on your body and on your face, if that makes sense. So that's always what I think about. I think, how long is that thing going to be on me? I better make sure that's more natural. And then I don't get so overwhelmed either with all that, you can do, because it can seem overwhelming.
Yeah. I mean, people worry about sometimes like hormones and like creams that they might use that have hormones in them. So we need to think like everything is that way. Like,
yeah,
you read about hormones and things, like any chemical that you put on your skin gets absorbed right into your body. So topical administration of anything is super important to think about.
100%.
And again, that's why that environmental working group is a great place to go for cosmetics and looking and seeing what you're using that could be hurting you. So that's an easy one we can all do. Filtering the water. I know everyone talks about the Berkey as being the best. Yeah. So, you can do your own research, but it sounds like a Berkey type water system is the highest quality to get as much out of your water. I know Zero Water is another filter that's out there, but and this is, I feel like, again, not everyone would have access to this, but if you can, filtering your water and not drinking out of plastic water bottles, that's huge, right? We think about the phthalates again, like, please, limit your exposure to plastic water bottles. From an environmental perspective, they're horrible too. So that's another one. We talked about cleaning smarter, using, simple things like lemon and vinegar and baking soda, and avoiding, those spray bottles that you can tell you literally have to wear a mask when you're cleaning with them. I mean, I've done that before and I'm like, why am I using this? I really feel like I need an N95 mask as I'm cleaning. Just be a clue that we probably shouldn't be using that. So let's see. And then nonstick pans too, anything that's coated with something that says nonstick, that is a chemical that's dangerous as well. So staying away from those types of cooking where they have nonstick additives on it.
And again, if you're thinking like, oh my gosh, like how much is this clean lifestyle going to cost? Well, good news, because again, God made beautiful things in our earth that we can use all the time, but also like things like vinegar and like lemon, like Teresa said, baking soda, like you don't need anything fancy. Like don't buy stuff to mop your floor with no, I always think about this. I'm like, if my feet also absorbs a ton, and if I'm mopping my floor with a chemical and it's like literally entering into my body as I'm mopping, if you don't have something, so you can use vinegar and water and an oil or something, like clean your floor with that, and it's fine. It's fine. So there are natural, inexpensive ways to live a life that isn't as toxic. Also, I'll say this too, Teresa, before we wrap up. I know sometimes for me, if I'm learning something, I think, yeah, this is really good information, but oh shoot, like I've lived 35 years of not knowing this information. So what state is my body in? So what I want to say and invite you to do is think about doing a cleanse or kind of helping your liver along, because your liver is what really filters through those toxins. And so there are easy ways. You could do some research, but there are many ways to do liver cleanses. And if you have specific question on what I recommend, you can reach out to me. You can visit my website, fiatliving.org. Or just email us at hormonegenius@gmail.com and ask, and I can get you connected. But there's a very gentle cleanse that I always recommend women start with first, and it's really just focusing on the liver. So anyway, do you have any? Yeah.
The liver is like this giant sponge that sucks up everything, and it has to filter out everything. So if you have, I mean, I'm in that position, Jamie, where I'm like, gosh, I look back and I think I did not know any of this stuff. And so I want to take now steps to help detoxify and limit my exposure. That's all we can do. Again, we can only do what we can do. I always tell my patients, don't get overly obsessed with this.
Right.
When we all live in the same world, we're all going to the same place. It's called a grave. Nobody gets out of death, guys. So,
true.
We have to live each day to the fullest and to the greatest. And yes, we can do what we can, but don't let this stuff get you down so much. I mean, be educated, be an advocate, and at the same time, live your life and be joyful and be happy. I can't stress that enough, because I just see that sometimes on my patient's face, and I'm thinking, well, it's not good to just obsess about this. I know that, and to get really super down about it. So
and get really obsessed or kind of compulsive with those things, not healthy.
Not good. So, hey, and one just super fun tip about apple cider vinegar and hair. I love this. So I have curly hair. It's kind of a mess today. You guys can't see it on the podcast, but if you have curly hair, and actually it's great for any hair, do an apple cider vinegar rinse in your hair, and your hair curl will just magically come back. Because all of those conditioners that we put and all those products that you put in your hair, that apple cider vinegar will just cleanse that all away, and you will get so much more curl and bounce and back in your hair. So, and actually beer works the same way.
Beer?
Yeah, beer. So I poured a whole thing of beer on my head just to kind of cleanse my hair too, to get some of that curl back. But that's just a fun kind of extra bonus tip.
Teresa, you know what we should do in another episode? We should talk about all of our hacks, the things we do. Would that be fun or what? That'd be so fun.
Yeah.
Real quick about the apple cider vinegar. So like you literally just pour it over your head, and then do you take a brush and like a pick brush thing to kind of work through, or how do you do it? Do
I
you
just
let soap
my head in the sink, and I just pour it over, and I just kind of like work it through really good, and then I rinse it in cold water, and it has a very strong smell, as you can imagine. And my daughter is like, oh my gosh, I can smell vinegar all over you, but I don't care because my curl came back.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah,
okay, I'm gonna use that.
Dilute it, but I don't dilute it. So, but
I wonder if you could even put like in a spray bottle and go everywhere too, and soak it that way. Maybe not.
Okay, that'd take a long time.
That would take a long time because you have a lot of hair. Wow, that's good to know. Shoot. Okay, we're gonna do that. We're gonna do a hacks. Like Teresa and Jamie will come up with a fun way to call it, but that's cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I hope this left everybody more empowered. Again, don't get anxious about any of this. These can be, pick one thing that we shared to start with, and pick the easiest one. Like the one that I think might be the easiest, Teresa, is not to take the receipt, because I did not know that. That is crazy. So yeah, I mean, knowledge is power, right? So we know better, we do better. But again, we need to live our lives as well. So Teresa, thank you for sharing all that information. I always learn a ton from you, and hopefully our listeners just were able to jot some thoughts down, share this episode with your friends. And again, we will see you all on our next episode. Have a great day, guys.